set of slides actually originated from South Dakota State University, their extension program. Back in the summer of 2021, they co-opted with North Dakota State University Extension and had this mineral program throughout the summer for producers. So this is a pretty broad overview. We're not going to get into the nitty-gritty details, but if you have questions, Tracy and I will try our best to answer them. But we are fortunate because we got Carl in the back and we can say, there we go. So just to kick off, why do we provide minerals? So many minerals are essential nutrients with very specific functions. The functions of minerals can be divided into four major areas: skeletal development and maintenance. So that's including minerals that are utilized for bone and teeth formation. Energy. These are minerals that are components of enzymes or other compounds in the body that is essential for energy production and utilization or other activities necessary for normal growth and reproduction. Calcium is a big one for milk production. And then finally, basic body function. These are the minerals that are required for normal function for basic systems in the body, such as our nervous system or cattle's nervous system. So mineral requirements for beef cattle are dependent upon animal age, the stage of production, and what is being supplied through diet. So that's a big one, is what is being supplied through diet. Diet is considered both feed and water. Oftentimes, mineral contribution from water may be ignored, but it is very important, especially when water could be high in salt and sulfates. Ideally, all feeds and water should be tested for mineral content to determine deficiencies, toxicities, and interactions between minerals. Once that is determined, then we can determine what we need to supply through mineral supplementation. Here's an example of nutrient requirements for a 1,200-pound beef cow milking 20 pounds of milk during the lactation period. From this graph and in alphabetical order, we can see the requirements and maximum tolerable concentration for minerals. So I just want to note that minerals are broken down between macro minerals and micro minerals. Macro minerals are required in larger amounts and presented as a percentage, versus micro minerals, or also known as trace minerals, are expressed as a percentage of the diet, or the milligram, or they're usually expressed as a hang on. They're usually expressed as milligrams per kilogram. Those are the trace minerals. Some mineral requirements are not listed because research data is inadequate for that specific mineral to be determined, such as molybdenum and nickel, chromium and chlorine. So one thing I want to note from these tables is that there are some minerals that have a very narrow range between what is required for gestation, early lactation, and what is the maximum tolerable concentration. So just to raise awareness, looking at magnesium, they have a very tight range. So this is a twofold. So you can go from 0.2 to 0.4, and it's maximum, you reach the maximum tolerable level. The same as with selenium, very narrow range of 0.1 to 2. So what happens when we do not meet mineral requirements? Well, it takes a while, but eventually an animal will show signs of problems. Here are the common mineral deficiency problems beef producers should be aware of. Forage is one of the largest components of a beef cattle's diet, unless on a finishing ration, and forages serve as the most economical nutrient source. Forage mineral content is influenced by both the quantity and availability of the minerals in the soil. When cattle are grazing during the summer months, they can store excess minerals and then utilize those minerals later from their stores, or when they're being fed forages that are low in content later on in the season. At some point, though, the animal's mineral stores will become deficient and operations will have slightly lowered weight gains in calves, reduced milk production in cows, and decreased reproduction rates as well in cows. On the flip side, excess mineral consumption may cause reduced cow or calf performance without obvious signs of toxicity. It is important to know when the animal is intaking, what it is intaking through its diet, and what is provided in a supplement to avoid issues with production and prevent unnecessary costs.
So now we're going to go through mineral tags, reading them in their different parts. So we've all seen these. You guys should have these in front of you. That's why we handed them out. And all of these labels look similar, and there's a reason for that. The feed labeling guide outlines certain elements that are needed on mineral tags. A major function of mineral regulation is to safeguard the health of man and animals, and a critical component of that function is to ensure that animal minerals and ingredients are appropriately and safely used as directed by the label. But some states may have additional regulations. So the first part that we're going to go over on the different things required is the product name and its brand name. So these are just some examples that you might see. There are a couple regulations for a label in regarding to a product or brand name. The product and brand name must be appropriate for the feed's intended use and cannot be misleading in any way. If the product's name indicates a specific person or a specific purpose, the feed's composition must correspond to that. The next part is the purpose statement. A purpose statement provides the mineral purchaser with information on the specific species and animals to which the mineral is for. The purpose statement may be excluded if the product or brand name already identifies the species and class for which the product is intended.
The guaranteed analysis statement is a required element of feed labels. The nutrients that must be guaranteed will vary with the intended use of the feed and by the specific animal species, class of animals such as calves versus bulls, or stage of production such as gestation versus lactation. So these are the required guarantees for beef cattle in a mineral supplement. The label must include the minimum and the maximum calcium percentage, the minimum phosphorus, the minimum and maximum salt percentage, and total sodium if total sodium exceeds that furnished by the max salt guarantee, minimum magnesium, minimum potassium, and then looking at the trace minerals, minimum copper, selenium, and zinc. And again, that's going to be labeled as parts per million. And then a minimum for vitamin A, and that's international units per pound. Here's just an example of the guaranteed analysis on the mineral label.
You guys can see that on the labels we handed you, right? Okay.
All right. The ingredient statement is the next item that's required on a mineral tag. And so the law requires every single ingredient or class of ingredients present in a formula to be listed on the tag. Not all these nutrients, though, that are listed are required to be guaranteed. Under federal law, ingredient statement must be listed in descending order of predominance by weight in the product, just like our own human food labels. So your most predominant component is going to be listed first. It is important to read through the list of ingredients and know what sources of minerals are being used to supply a particular mineral. Some mineral sources are very available to the animal, whereas other sources offer little bioavailability to that animal through the digestive tract. Okay, so talking about bioavailability. This is where we're going to get into the nitty-gritty details. Mineral sources are divided into three groups: inorganic, organic, and hydroxy trace minerals. Generally speaking, inorganic minerals will be less expensive, but are typically less bioavailable than the organic and the hydroxy trace mineral sources. There is significant variation within inorganics, with sulfates and chlorides being more available then oxides and carbonates. The exceptions to this are zinc oxide and magnesium oxide, both of which have a relative bioavailability of 100. Organic minerals are characterized as high cost with medium bioavailability to the animal. Organic minerals are those that are bound to an amino acid, a proteinate, polysaccharide, or other organic molecule, and they have a relative bioavailability that exceeds 100. If animals are stressed or there's antagonistic relationships between minerals that are present in large amounts, the extra price paid for organic minerals may be justified. Organic minerals will provide more value to cattle during weaning or other stressful periods, but the cost will likely exceed the benefits in a standard year-round approach. So make sure when you're offering organic minerals, you're doing so where it's going to give you the most bang for your buck. Hydroxy trace minerals are bound by covalent bonds to multiple hydroxyl groups that allows the trace minerals to bypass the rumen and be digested lower in the digestive tract, thus increasing bioavailability. These minerals have a high bioavailability with a medium cost and could be incorporated in high stress situations or as a portion of the trace minerals year-round.
And if you're having trouble seeing this, because I'm sure you probably can't, in the handout that we have right by the door, it has this in here.
Okay, so now we're going to look up close at the ingredients list. And if you could click one more time, and we're going to just point out some of those hydroxy oxides that I just talked about. So looking up close at a label, here we can pick out some of those keywords from the previous slides. We discussed that oxides are an inorganic and generally less bioavailable source of minerals, with the exception of magnesium oxide. Magnesium oxide is a good magnesium source, but can be unpalatable. And so magnesium oxide is one of those first ones listed, but going before that, we have molasses. So molasses, most commonly you'll see molasses listed first. Molasses is there to help with palatability because some of these mineral products are unpalatable. So molasses helps the palatability of that product. Up next, we find hydroxychloride. And so that's zinc hydroxychloride. That has a relative bioavailability of 200, whereas zinc oxide, one of those oxide exceptions I just mentioned, has a relative bioavailability of 100. Remember that hydroxy group the mineral is bound to helps bypass the rumen, therefore increasing the bioavailability. The same is true for manganese hydroxychloride. Copper chloride has a relative bioavailability over 100, but looking at the copper oxide option, that decreases to 15. Ethylene diamine dihydroiodide is a form of iodine with a relative bioavailability of 100. The next set of ingredients outlined in red are organic minerals that offer high levels of bioavailability. For example, selenium yeast has a relative bioavailability of 290. The last set of orange outlined minerals are examples of inorganic minerals. So cobalt carbonate, cobalt sulfate. Generally, the sulfate versions will be greater in bioavailability than the carbonate.
The next part on the label is directions for safe and effective use. The required when contain a feed additive. Directions for use and precautionary statements are required for all commercial feeds and customer formula feeds when they contain a feed additive. Feed additives include things such as drugs, special purpose, or non-protein nitrogen ingredients. And it's essential that the directions fit the intended declared in the label's purpose statement with simple and concise directions. Every commercial mineral label must include directions for the safe and effective use of the mineral. Precaution statements, including caution and warning statements, must be identical to the FDA-defined precautions related to the drugs and animal food additives. Warning and caution statements must appear on a prominent place in the label, and if use directions cannot be printed on the front of the label, then the front of the label must direct the reader to location of where they are on the label, such as see backup tag for directions. So these are some examples on them that'll say the directions for safe and effective use. And then examples of some of the cautionary statements. Probably the main one that most people have heard of is when the mineral bag will say contains copper and cannot be fed to sheep.
Up next on the label is the manufacturer's or distributor's name and address. The firm or person's name that appears on the label is responsible for the product in complying with state and federal regulations. When the product is not manufactured by the responsible party, the name shall be qualified with a phrase such as manufactured for or distributed by.
And then the last part is quantity or net weight statement, which is in standard or metric units. Each package container or bulk lot label must contain an accurate statement as to the net quantity or net weight of the commercial feed per Section 4 of the Fair Packaging and Labeling Act. The statement's term of weight or measure must be expressed in ounce pounds units and must include the appropriate metric unit. Sometimes they're hard to find and read, but they identify the production date, manufacturing code, and different companies can have different keys to their lot numbers, which can be confusing. So that part's not as regulated, that they have to have the same keys and lot numbers.
All right. So, you guys have any questions since we went over the parts of a mineral tag? Did everyone get their copy? So looking on there, you can try to read through the ingredient list. What are the mineral sources for copper, magnesium, manganese, or zinc?
Copper amino acid complex.
Oh, so it's an amino acid complex. So then what would that one be? Oops. An organic? Yeah, that's wise. Organic.
Did anyone see one for zinc on their tag?
I found a zinc sulfate. Did anyone have the blue one? Okay, what's a sulfate? Generally, they're more bioavailable than the oxide or the carbonate version, but that would be an inorganic mineral. So this we're kind of just doing a broad overview, but we see these quite frequently. But now you know why the content on this label is there.
Or why so many of them have the same headings, and that's because they're required to.
So just giving some consistency. Do you guys have any questions for us? And I do just want to note that we want to say thank you to Adele Hardy. So this is where this presentation originated from. She was with NDSU Extension. She left, but this was a program that NDSU Extension delivered in the summer, I believe 2021. This is a broad overview, but it fit really nicely in with what they were doing with producers. So Tracy and I just wanted to bring it to share it with you guys today.